This is exactly how far along I get into a build before I stop building and I go to the computer and I set up my quadcopter. And you guys have seen me set up quadcopters before in lots of build tutorials, but this one's a little bit different because this is my perfect freestyle build. I'm updating it a little bit for 2022, and another video is going to come out about those changes. But what I'm going to do in this video is take this quadcopter, which is one of my actual quadcopters. I haven't done any setup on it. I've just plugged it in, and I'm going to take you through the setup process, and you're going to see every single step of how I set up my own quadcopter today. I'm Joshua Bardwell. You're going to learn something today. And while I get ready for the very first step, I do want to let you know that this is not going to be a super in-depth tutorial. I've got super in-depth tutorials for most of the stuff that I'm going to do. I mostly just want you guys to be able to come along and see sort of the order that I do things, the things that I do that you might not do, and maybe the things that I leave out that you think are important, which I'm sure you'll let me know about down in the comments. There are in-depth tutorials for most of this stuff, and I'll have links to them down in the video description if you want to check them out. Of course, you're also always welcome to email me and ask me if you've got any questions. The very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set up the video transmitter, the goggles, and the receiver. I like to do that stuff before I set up my flight controller so that they're all just working. When I set up the flight controller, I can see that they're all working correctly. And we're going to start with the DJI goggles and the DJI video transmitter. This is a DJI video transmitter. And what I need to do is I need to bind them and then to root them and install WTFOS. Ooh, what's that? I did just plug in a battery to my quadcopter. I have smoke checked this one previously. This being a new build, of course, I would never plug in a battery without doing a proper smoke check. And if you're not sure how I do a smoke check, then there's a link in the video description down below. Hit see more and expand the video description. The links are all down there. Goggles are binding and air unit is binding, and now the air unit is bound. Yay, and we should have a picture in the goggles. And sure enough, we do, and the goggles are telling me that the firmware is out of date. Let's take care of that next. Here we go. I got to activate it, of course. Great. Yes, I agree to all the terms. Of course I do. And the firmware that's on the video transmitter is 0608, which is the latest version. That's weird, because that should be correct for my goggles. Wait a second. Oh, well, now it's happy. Well, that was weird. Folks, this is why I wanted to do this video with you, so you could come along with all the fun and games. It bound, and then it said there was a firmware problem, and then I checked the firmware, and the firmware was on the latest, and then it wasn't bound, and now it's bound, and let's try a power cycle and see if it works again. Oh yeah, it's working. No error message, no nothing. Fantastic. Okay, now it's time to root the video transmitter. And I know that word has a certain meaning in some other parts of the world that it doesn't have in the United States. Basically, in computer parlance, rooting means that you unlock it so that you can install modifications to it and plugins. And the main thing that I'm doing this for is that when you root it, you can install a plugin that lets you have the full Betaflight OSD. Every functionality of an analog Betaflight OSD in the DJI goggles. And why would you not want that? Here we go. Again, I have a tutorial about how to root the goggles, what the benefits are, and so forth. You should definitely watch that. Do not just dive into this willy-nilly, because although it's relatively safe, there are some gotchas that would make it not work and would frustrate you. All right, now that it's been rooted, we're going to install WTFOS. That's going to take a minute. And now that that's done, we will go ahead and install the MSP OSD service. That's the one that's going to give us the full Betaflight OSD. And with that, our DJI video transmitter is ready to go. Next up, Express LRS. The receiver on this build is the Express LRS Happy Model EP1, and I'm just going to go ahead and flash it with Express LRS 3.0. That's the same version of Express LRS I have on my controller. One of the nice things about Express LRS is that I don't need to go through any bind procedure. I'm just going to flash it, and I would update the firmware on pretty much any receiver when I first get it anyway. And after I flash it, it will just automatically be bound to my controller without any fussing around. The receiver has gone to fast flashing, which means it's in Wi-Fi mode, and I'm going to go ahead and try to connect to it. over Wi-Fi, and that's how I prefer to flash the receivers. You can flash them over USB, but sometimes it's a little quirky, and I just think it works more seamlessly over Wi-Fi. Usually. Well, while that's waiting, I'm just going to go ahead and hit build and build this firmware. Oh, here we go. We are connected. That's great. We'll open up a web browser and go to 10.0.0.1, and that is the receiver page. And when that's done, this window pops up with our newly built firmware in it. And what I like to do for my own convenience is just grab that file and drag it to the desktop. Just copy that to the desktop so I know where to find it. Then we go back to our web browser where it says firmware update. We will choose that file and we will update the receiver. Update succeeded. Fantastic. And now if I power on my controller, I should see that it is connected to this receiver. And people say ExpressLRS is hard to set up. How hard was that? Okay, it's hard if you don't already know how to do it. It's not so bad. That's how long it takes me. Moving on. Next, we're going to set up the flight controller, and that means we've opened up Betaflight Configurator, and the very first thing we're going to do is flash the flight controller to the latest version of Betaflight. It's not a bad idea to back up the configuration for the flight controller before you do this. Even if it's factory fresh, you never know, and you might need that, but I've got a million of these flight controllers, so I can always find a default configuration if I need one. I'm not too worried about that. The firmware name is going to be JBF7V2, and I'm going to go ahead and load that firmware, and then I'm going to hit flash firmware. And it's going to give us a warning. The board ships with the target named JBF7 Pro. That's just a development name. The actual official target is JBF7V2. So normally this warning might mean I was about to flash the wrong firmware, but in this case, I'm not too worried about it. I know why it's saying that. I'm going to proceed. Alrighty, now that the board's been flashed, we will, of course, always apply custom defaults. And then we begin the configuration. And I confess that normally what I would do is I would go to the presets tab. And here in the preset sources, you'll see I have my own GitHub repo. It's not special. I'm not special. Anybody can set one of these up. I have a video about how you could set one up. It's not for everybody. But if you want to load my presets into your Betaflight configurator, you can put this information in. You can add a new source, put this information in, and you can see the exact thing I'm seeing here. And one of the things in my presets repo is the complete configuration for my perfect freestyle build. So since I build this exact same quadcopter a lot of the time, I would just apply this preset, be ready to go. But I'm going to set it up for you from scratch as if it was fresh, so you can see how long it takes me. And I know that my receiver is plugged into UART2 and my DJI Air unit is plugged into UART1. I know that because I checked the wiring diagram before I did this take. And I always have to remind myself, T1 and R1 for the TX and RX of the Air unit, that's UART1. And then down to the receiver is UART2, T2 and R2. In the ports tab, you got UART2 with serial RX enabled. That is correct. And for the DJI, we're going to have MSP enabled for UART1, and we're going to save and reboot. That's it. I don't have anything else using any UARTs on this flight controller, so all the other ones, there's nothing to set up. Next, I like to go to the receiver tab, and I like to see if my receiver is working. It always feels good when you get the receiver working. So we'll just power on here. And sure enough, it is working. I will double check that my controls are mapped correctly. Throttle, yaw, roll, and pitch, they are correct. I've got tutorials about how to set those up if they're not mapped correctly. My endpoints are correct. That's fine. We're good to go there. Link in the video description to the tutorial. I like to change my stick low threshold to 1010 and my stick high threshold to 1990 because my endpoints are correct, and therefore I can have those values decrease the amount of deadband at the bottom at the edges of the stick travel. That is it for this tab. We will go ahead and save. Next, we're going to go to presets. And I'm going to go to the Betaflight official presets and make them active. And what I want to do is I want to load the RC Link preset for my control link. This is not mandatory. You don't have to do this, but it will make the quadcopter fly just a little bit better. And I'm using ExpressLRS 250 Hertz most of the time. And then we're also going to choose the Freestyle Fine Tune which is going to change the RC smoothing, the difference of smoothing versus directness of the sticks. Freestyle is pretty smooth, not as smooth as racing. This is a serial ELRS RX. Once I've set those options, I will pick and I will save and reboot. The next thing I will do is set up my aux modes, and for this one I am going to use a preset. I am not going to set it up manually because I literally use this same preset for all of my quadcopters. We'll go back to my private repo, we'll make it active, and here we should be able to find my Express LRS aux configuration, and then we will pick that. And while we're at it, I'm also going to set up my on-screen display. This is a DJI MSP, so we're going to choose DJI WTFOS, and we will pick that. That's going to set my OSD up. And are there any others that I need to set up? Oh yeah, my rates. We'll set my freestyle rates as well, and we will pick that. And that's going to set up my rates, my on-screen display, and my aux modes. Boom. I said I was going to show you how I do a normal setup. That is how I do a normal setup. I literally do that for all of my quadcopters. Just bang, bang, bang. Now, as long as we're setting up the on-screen display, there is one more step that's necessary for the DJI MSP on-screen display, and that is to do, it's DisplayPort MSP serial. I always struggle to remember that. DisplayPort MSP serial equals, and this is going to be one less than the UART, so we're on UART number 1, so we're going to put 0 and save. That just tells it what UART to use to talk to the video transmitter. Great, and at this point we should, yes, we have OSD in the menu, in the goggle, so that's all working right. Fantastic. On-screen display is set up exactly how I like it. That's fantastic. Let's just go through here and see if there's other stuff that I should be changing. Oh yeah, we got to put the craft name in, JB. We're going to put the maximum arm angle to 180. That allows you to arm when the quadcopter is at any angle. And that, of course, I'm going to do all the time. We want the motors to beep when because we don't have a beeper on this quad, so we want the motors to beep instead, and we'll do that by enabling these two options, and we'll save that. Next, I think we're going to come to the motors tab, and what we'll do is we will just double check the motor order or the motor position. We really shouldn't have to do this because this flight controller and ESC are designed to work together, but we'll do it anyway. I would usually check this on a new build just to be sure. We'll change our motor protocol to DShot 300. We're using DShot 300 because this flight controller, the gyro, only runs at 3.2 kilohertz. There's not any real... The Betaflight devs and my personal opinion is that there's not a real compelling reason to run any faster than the PID loop. And DShot 300 is the same speed as a 3.2K PID loop, more or less. DShot 600 would run faster, but would have some disadvantage and a debatable benefit. We're going to enable bidirectional DShot as well, and we're going to save and reboot. And I don't know why we would have 100% errors here. We should really not have 100% errors. What if we click away and come back? That's too bad. This is telling us that the ESC is not talking to the flight controller. But that's not true because we heard the doot-a-doot that tells us that it is talking to the flight controller. No, something is not. That's bad. Well, now we should not see any error percent because, hey, I turned bidirectional off. This isn't a BLHeli ESC, is it? Surely not. It is. Well, I have accidentally bought a BLHeli ESC. I thought it was cheaper because it was a 45 amp ESC compared to the 55 amp one, and apparently there's more to it than that. That is also a BLHeli ESC. Yeah, so $86 for the 32-bit ESC versus $55 for the 45 amp ESC. I bought the 45 amp BLHeli S, and that's why it doesn't support bidirectional DShot, except it does. Yeah. We're going to go to esc-configurator.com, and this is where we're going to flash these ESCs and let us use bidirectional DShot. I'm going to close Betaflight Configurator so it's not running in the background. We'll select this serial port and connect. We will read settings. We will flash all the ESCs. The firmware is BLHeli S. No, the firmware is going to be BlueJay. The version is going to be, I don't know, 016. And the PWM frequency, I think 24K. I'll usually use a lower PWM frequency and see if I get good results because it's going to give you more braking torque and more responsiveness. 48 would be smoother maybe, but I'm going to try 24 and see what happens. Would I rather have 48? Be smoother. Let's do 48. I changed my mind. You know, the thing I'm going to miss most from BLE32 ESCs is my custom Mario power-up startup sound. Oh well. I think BlueJay can do startup sounds too, but I don't actually have that startup sound. Could it be in the library? That would be cool. Oh, let's see. Open melody editor. Select a melody. Can I search? Is Mario here? Come on, baby. No. Oh, I see. We got Never Gonna Give You Up, but we don't have the Mario power-up. Man. Oh. That's one up. Is that? I don't think that's the same. Let's try it. Oh, that's not bad. How do we apply the melody? Accept. Right melodies. Oh, yeah. Thanks, BlueJay devs. I just saved $30. Times 3 quadcopters. I just saved $90. Who needs BLE32? I don't need BLE32. Okay then, let's try this again. Bidirectional D-shot. Come on, baby. Yes! 0 error %. They're talking. Fantastic. Now then, as I was saying, we're going to start by just checking the motor positions. We'll do that by hitting reorder motors. I understand the risks. We will start, and I will click on the spinning motor. Yes. Boom. Good. Boom. Good. Boom. Good. Boom. Good. Save. And next we'll do the motor direction. And I am an old fogey who uses props in rotation. I've just don't think there's an advantage on 5-inch quadcopters, and I've just done it forever. So that's how we're going to set it up. We'll do motor direction, and we will, let's do it individually. And what I'd like to do, I can't always tell which way the motors are spinning, so I like to get out this little brush that I use to clean my keyboard. And I will spin a motor, like motor number 1. It should be spinning. That is correct. Motor number 2. That is correct. Oh, man. Motor number 3. Wrong. Okay, so 3 we need to reverse. That is correct. And 4 we need to reverse. And that's it. That's done. Great. And then I like to do just one last little check using the sliders. Fantastic. Motor set up. Excellent. I think that's it. Is the flight controller aimed the right way? It is. Ooh, black box. Yeah, we'll do black box. Black box logging rate. So I always set up my black box. I'm sure I've missed something, but I don't know what it is. Accelerometer is not calibrated. Oh, let's calibrate the accelerometer. We'll put it flat on the desk. Okay, we'll calibrate the accelerometer. Okay, now you happy? I don't actually have a PID tune for these exact motors. The last time I PID tuned this guy, I was using the 25mm Imperial motors from FPV Cycle. More about why I've got the 2207s from Zing on here when we do the video about the new choices. But for now, we're just going to leave the PID tune at the defaults. And the filters, I mean, surely I can disable gyro low pass 1, right? Surely I can at least do that, right? I mean, if I've turned on RPM filtering, I should be able to do that. So I guess we'll do that, and we'll call that the default with no PID tune. All right, then the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to type diff all at the CLI, and I'm going to save this out to a file. And that file, we'll just put it on my desktop for now. And I'm actually going to take and put that into my own presets repo later after I've verified that it's 100% correct and maybe after I've PID tuned, so that when I set up the rest of these, boom, I could just copy it in. But the next thing I think we should do is just verify sort of that it's working. So we'll power cycle. We'll just grab the quadcopter, or the controller rather, and good sign. Turtle mode. Turtle mode, looking good, working correctly. Beeper, working correctly. Everything checks out. I kind of feel like I must have forgotten something. If I think of what that is before I publish this video, I'll go ahead and put it in. But I think I basically just finished configuring the quadcopter, and now it's time to sort of button it up and, of course, do the pre-flight testing and so forth and all that stuff. But that's it. How long did this take me? Let's see. The camera says I've been recording for 51 minutes. And if we look here in my recordings folder, we can see this recording started at 23:21. So 11:21 p.m. and it is now 12:13 a.m. So just a little less than an hour. And that's with me talking and explaining it to you, of course. It would have gone a little faster if I was just doing it myself. So maybe about a half hour. A half hour for a complete start to finish configuration, update firmware, everything. And it would have gone even faster if I was allowed to use the preset to configure my flight controller in one swell foop. So that's what it takes. That's how I do it. If you want to know more details about how I built this, why I picked the parts that are in this and so forth, I've got a full build tutorial for this. Well, I want to say this exact quadcopter, but this is actually sort of the Mark II updated edition with an updated flight controller, a slightly different ESC, apparently a BLHeli-S ESC. Okay. But I got a build tutorial for this quadcopter, and it's got a full setup guide as well. I'll put a link to that down in the video description if you want to check it out. I'll also put a card on screen. And it'll get there easier if you're watching somewhere that shows you cards. Look forward to more information about the changes I've made in this build coming up later on this channel. That's going to do it for now. Happy flying.